Hello again. We are back on the conference. Now let's start the talks. This is a community event, but we are very happy to start with official keynotes from Silverstripe Limited in New Zealand. We are starting with Whyman and Bryn. Hello, guys.
Hello.
I'm fine. It's very nice to see you. Wayne is the new CEO of Silverstripe, and Bryn is a product manager. And we are all used to see the faces of Sigurd and Sam. You are the new faces of Silverstripe. So we are really keen to know what you are planning for the future of Silverstripe.
Bryn's face is a lot newer or younger than mine, but we won't get into that too much detail. So thank you. I'm the new CEO of Silverstripe Limited. I took over from Sam in March this year. I have one message for everybody here today. That is that Silverstripe is committed to continuing to make sure that we grow and support this community. So that's the key message we have today. The most important person that you have on this talk here is not necessarily me, but Bryn. Bryn is our head of product who looks after this community and looks after the Silverstripe CMS so that it continues to move forward. So you'll hear more from Bryn in a few minutes. We were to be joined tonight, or today, I should say, this morning by Nick, but unfortunately Nick couldn't make it. So what I'll do, I think we have a presentation that you can all see. But maybe just initially a little bit about me, first of all, most importantly. I suppose, I was born in South Africa not too many years ago. I taught and lectured STEM-based subjects, science, technology, engineering, and maths. And I had students go on to develop all sorts of really cool stuff around the world. So that was quite good. I then spent about 20 years in England, in the UK. Living in the UK, but working all over the world, leading and transforming and growing various different technology businesses. 4 years ago, I was asked to come out to New Zealand to run a technology business in New Zealand. My wife is a Kiwi, so my kids have now adopted New Zealand as their home. At the beginning of this year, I was actually asked to take on the CEO role of Silverstripe. So hence we're still in New Zealand and loving it. I think if we can move on, please, Bryn. What I wanted to do is just give you a perspective of Silverstripe Limited and who the people are, because as Andy said, they're new people, new faces. Sam, Sig, Tim, etc. They're all still part of Silverstripe. They're actually on the board. I meet with them every single month at the board meetings. I meet with them throughout the month as well. They're still actively involved in making sure that Silverstripe is extremely successful, and not only Silverstripe Limited, but the community and CMS itself. So, but the people that you see on the board here are essentially my leadership team at Silverstripe Limited. On the left-hand side, we have Dom. She's a Kiwi. Dom is a Kiwi. She runs all of our customer and sales and marketing activity. Pete is a Scotsman, and Pete runs basically our agency business at Silverstripe. We have an agency business in New Zealand, which I will talk about in a bit more detail shortly, and how it can help you guys as well. Nick is our technology or we call it a digital officer, but essentially everything technology and operations and platform related goes to Nick. Bryn, who will speak in a few minutes, actually works in Nick's team, and there's quite a lot of work that they're actually doing. Nick is a ex-developer, technologist turned business person, developed his own SaaS products, and done a number of things. Worked in loyalty, etc., etc. Tobias, as we should say, is a German, and he's our operations officer. He's actually currently living in Malaysia, but hopefully at some point soon we will have him in New Zealand. So that's the core team. They are the people that help us make sure that everything ticks along nicely in Silverstripe. As I say, Bryn, who will talk in a minute, reports into Nick, and we'll talk more about how we actually do support the community and CMS. But on that, if we just go on to the next slide, please, Bryn. Maybe just a bit of some key takeaways that I'd like to get across here. The first one is that we started out, or Silverstripe started out as an open source software and community. That is still our intention today. We are absolutely committed again. And if I keep saying that too often, fantastic, because we are committed to making sure the success of that. What we also did do was if we press again, please, Bryn, maybe a few times there, just to, what we did was we won the government business in New Zealand to build a digital experience platform. So that launched our ability to build that. We've partnered up with AWS now to be able to build that platform. We've learned a lot over the last few years. And, what we're doing is we're working with AWS to be able to release that platform further afield as well. We do have clients around the world who currently do consume Silverstripe in the platform, digital experience platform. And that's an area that, if you wanted to speak to the team about, that's an area that could help to augment some of the work that you actually do today. We also have built a digital experience agency business in New Zealand. And again, there's a lot of work that we've done there that, I feel we could share with the community and vice versa. I'm interested to see over the next few days what work you're all doing, because I'm saying to the team, we can actually learn a lot from the community as well. And that's another reason why I'm very keen for it to progress. So, who knows what's going to happen in the future? We have some ideas right now. But if we just press again, Bryn, I think one more, if you don't mind. One thing we do know, and this is an area that I'm very excited about because we're at the cusp of this, not only Silverstripe Limited in New Zealand, but us as a community around the world. The one thing that's really, really key right now is this digital ecosystem. This area, this space, if you like, where people and things are increasingly connected to content to be able to create much better experiences for people around the world, and also to make people's lives much better. So that's a space that we're focused on. Our whole purpose around is starting to be focused around that area, if you like. What we'd like to do is we'd like to work with yourselves on that to understand more about what you're seeing, understand more about what you need, and understand how we actually grow Silverstripe CMS and also the community. So thank you. Over to Bryn.
Thanks, Wayne. So hi, everyone. I'll take over for the remainder of the talk. First to start off, I'll give you a little bit more about me. So my name is Bryn Whyman, and I'm the product manager for CMS at Silverstripe. I've been in the background of community interactions for the past 3 years or so. It's been 3 years, but I still haven't got around to updating my GitHub avatar, so this has become what I can't change now. When I came on board to Silverstripe, I was working as a product owner with the team that had oversight over what we refer to as the commercially supported CMS modules. And then we had a specific goal in mind, thinking 2 or 3 years ago, which was, we were getting funded for creating and enhancing feature sets of the CMS and framework, specifically for the New Zealand public sector. The goal had always been to use this funding to invest in the product based on the demand we were seeing in the open source, the work, so everyone could benefit from it. So over the past few years, I've become pretty familiar with this open source ecosystem. I think I've developed a pretty nifty skill of retaining GitHub issue titles in my head, and it surprises me how quickly I'm able to sometimes tell a duplicate issue when it's been raised, even though we're over 2,000 at the moment in GitHub. I've also spent a lot of time talking to and hearing from people like you. That's content editors and site owners on the features they feel could be improved in the CMS or might be missing, from developers on bug reports, feature requests, and support and documentation queries, and from Silverstripe partners and other digital agencies about the value that you want to add for your own clients. I feel very lucky to be a part of these conversations, and it's through the joys of this open source software that I feel lucky to be a part of the Silverstripe CMS ecosystem. Silverstripe CMS started its life in Little New Zealand by the legendary founders, which Wayne's talked to, but that's not really where the product is now. yes, there's most definitely a headquarters based in New Zealand, but as this conference goes to show, this software is far from being tied to New Zealand anymore, and I think that's pretty cool. So that's a little bit about me. What I want to build off today is what Wayne's been talking about and start to provide a bit more detail into what we've recently been talking about at Silverstripe when it comes to supporting the Silverstripe CMS community. First, I want to pull the curtain back on what our product development team does and how we work day to day. Then I'll share some data. We're using data from the ecosystem to help with our own decision making, so I want you to see that too. Then I want to put forward some ideas on where we might head next. As Wayne has mentioned, supporting the CMS community is going to see some revitalization. That's where we want to see a lot of our efforts go, and so I want to talk about that a little bit more. So what's behind the curtain? Well, did you know that Silverstripe has a dedicated product development team focused on building and supporting Silverstripe CMS? Did you know that alongside building features, this team also commits to resolving security issues and critical bugs in over 100 modules? I know that's probably a lot of context to hold, and the team does an amazing job at trying to do that, or doing that successfully with that amount of modules. Did you also know that this team puts each quarterly release through a third-party security audit? So any findings that are found in this audit are resolved before a CMS release goes stable. We put a lot of effort into the CMS being an extremely secure project, and we've found that often that message hasn't reached, that these are some of the things that we do behind the scenes. So trying to find an opportunity to share that stuff like now. Like any product, we're also constantly prioritizing, deliberating and reprioritizing what the most impactful thing is that we can work on with the limited amount of time that we have. We're pulled in many different directions too. You know, do we create something that's going to have a positive impact on a content editor or a site owner? Because without them, we probably wouldn't have a product to build. But we could also create something that's going to allow a developer to have a better experience when building with the framework. After all, if it's not helping you to do your job, you're probably not going to be a pretty big fan of it. Perhaps it's time we focus on the Silverstripe partners. You've chosen to deliver projects with Silverstripe CMS with great outcomes for your clients. Could we give you a better return on your investment by building more integrations with other products or features to speed up project development? But on top of all of those, we've also got an open source product. So people have to be there with support queries, reviewing and merging pull requests and contributions back into the product, making sure that unit and integration tests are passing for the 100+ modules, while also keeping on top of upgrades for the underlying libraries and resolving the security issues I've been talking about. So it can sometimes feel like we're hitting a moving target, but I think we've also done pretty well at hitting it and getting the treats from that. So what are some of the treats that I've talked about? So in the past year, we've seen some highlights from our own product team that I think we're pretty proud of. We implemented stronger support for restricted content stored in the CMS. With the CMS being trusted to be used by some of the most high-profile sites in New Zealand, including the COVID-19 information site and national banks, we know it's important for site owners to be sure that their content is secure. And with many organizations now heavily relying on digitizing their application forms, we've built features for the CMS to guide users in keeping this data secure. We've also added native lazy loading for front-end images maintained in the CMS, and you'll see that in the release that comes out next week. This was done in partnership with Google and helps you and your teams to create performant websites out of the box. I see there's actually an upcoming talk covering Core Web Vitals in the conference, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's something that we think the CMS has a responsibility to get right from the outset. And we've also doubled down on content APIs, providing a really strong opportunity through GraphQL to serve content in the CMS in a really scalable way through disrupting technologies like Next.js. Soon you'll hear from Uncle Cheese about that. This is really an opportunity that we think provides a lot of future-proofing for those who continue to choose Silverstripe CMS for delivering projects. And before these things delivered, I want to make that point that there's a lot of different audiences that we're trying to cater for. And it's all of these audiences that make up what we think of as the community. When I use the phrase community, I'm talking about this group. It's the users, the contributors, and the maintainers. So now I want to share some data, a lot of which focuses on this community. And I want to give a big shout out to Ingo Schumert or Chiller, who put a lot of time into building these queries to generate these insights. So thank you, Ingo. So first, I think this is a pretty cool one. According to the analytics from the CMS developer documentation site, we can see how those building with the product have made it to all areas of the globe. Well, except North Korea and the Svalbard Islands off the coast of Norway. Maybe someone in Norway is here and may know someone in those islands. There's also a couple of countries like Guinea and Sierra Leone in Africa that haven't yet seemed to have heard of Silverstripe CMS, but we've got pretty much the whole world. It's also really interesting for us to note that from this data that more than 80% of total activity is happening outside of New Zealand. So we've got a community that's truly global, but what about the size of that community relative to previous years? Well, size of the users of the community is pretty hard to measure, but what we can use is contribution statistics to get an idea of that group, and then also as a proxy for the rate of product adoption. So one way to look at contributions is to measure open source module count. And this graph shows the supported and core modules make up less than 1/10 of the whole ecosystem. So that's really a testament to the framework's extensibility and usefulness for a wide variety of use cases. It shows that in the last year alone, over 900 modules were in active development. Although, as you can see from that graph, since 2018, community activity on modules has actually dropped by 1/3. Comment activities are another good lead indicator for community contributions and engagement. Comments on GitHub issues and pull requests are a way to share feedback beyond writing code, right? Overall, we can see the amount of comments is nearly halved from its peak in 2018. Now, that could be attributed to reduced or disinterest from the community on one hand, but on the other hand, it could also be attributed to a lack of support, response, or outreach by module maintainers. Of course, this was also around the time that version 4 of the CMS was released, so that might be playing into the data and the outcome as well a little bit too. But I also want to make the point that this trend isn't something that we're seeing with the community. If we look at contributions to the open source product only by staff members employed by Silverstripe, we can see that those that created at least one pull request per year to core and supported modules has nearly halved since the peak in 2018. And that's despite the company being about the same size. And we see this trend pretty much like for like in the community as well. So things are trending down. And I want to come back to some theories about this in a moment. But before we say it's actually in decline, I want to share what researchers are seeing with other open source products. So the following graph shows monthly contributor numbers for 4 extremely popular open source projects on GitHub: React, FontAwesome, Elasticsearch, and Apache Spark. Now, what we can see here is the blue line with the red trend is the contributor numbers for React per month. Now, that doesn't look too dissimilar from the Silverstripe's data, right? What we see is a growth to a peak before the numbers start to drop off as the project reaches a mature, steady state. And I could say that Silverstripe CMS4 is probably in a bucket similar to that. I think what's also interesting about this graph is that React and FontAwesome, which is the yellow line, are both front-end frameworks, and they share the trend. The back-end frameworks of Elasticsearch and Apache Spark don't see such a peak growth. Now, Silverstripe is also a back-end framework and isn't historically linked with, front-end frameworks where people seem to pick them up, get excited about them, and then moved on. So it's fun to theorize about what it is that gave Silverstripe a contrasting growth trajectory compared to those other back-end frameworks. Maybe that's something you've got an idea on too. Now, I also want to point out that community engagement, or perhaps even adoption metrics, isn't the only measure of a successful product. And even further, community contributions are definitely not all that's required for a product to be successful. I want to call out one study done by North Carolina State researchers found that more than 85% of open source projects on GitHub, less than 5% of developers were responsible for 95% of the code and social interactions. You probably see some aliases on GitHub and the same people that comment or the people that you tag. I think something's pretty similar with Silverstripe too. So perhaps the precedent was set long ago that maintainers should not expect the vast majority to contribute back. But in saying all of this, I don't want you to think that you're off the hook from contributing as part of this open source community just yet. And moving on from contribution numbers, the last graph I want to show you is this one. Let's have a quick look at where the work has actually been going to and potentially who it's for. So at its foundation, CMS stands for Content Management System. This management happens at both the developer level in creating maintainable content structures, but also at the CMS user level. At Silverstripe, we can be pretty honest in the fact that CMS user content management hasn't always been at the forefront of the bulk efforts in the past year or two. It can be hard to quantify what the effect of a CMS feature deficit compared to other CMSs might be, or whether we actually have one, has on the overall engagement of the community, but this graph can give some insights into where that focus is going. So since 2019, you can see that bug fixes make up almost 70% of the work that's done for the core and supported modules, while new features make up almost only 10%. Now, while both these categories can benefit either developers or users of the CMS, it enables us to determine trends over time between proactive and reactive work. And admittedly, we've set other goals for better supporting innovative projects outside of the core module set. But I think this trend of bug fixing or reactive work gives light to the fact that the focus has been on stabilization, perhaps at the expense of pushing the content editing experience forward. So I want to move to my third and final point of the talk, which is what are we thinking about some of this data and where might we head next? And it's now that I want to echo back to what Wayne was saying at the start. It's that those that continue to invest in Silverstripe CMS to help run your business are incredibly valuable to the future of the product. We know that everyone attending this conference is regularly making a decision to use Silverstripe CMS over all the other products and frameworks. So many of you are champions for the CMS, and I think that's awesome. That's all while certain views of this data are showing that group to shrink. So we're having serious discussions about this at Silverstripe HQ, and to Wayne's point, adoption of the product is on the critical path to success of our company. And having a stance of looking at content experience more is also something that's really got to be there. We understand how much the community, that's users as well as contributors, are tethered to product innovation and adoption. And while I make no promises here as part of this short talk, we are on that path. And we understand that this is where we need to get to. So speaking of this, later in the conference, you'll hear from other Silverstripers like Andrew Paxley, who will be talking about how we've integrated the product with Elasticsearch, providing a much broader content experience. And from Brett Tasker, who is thinking deeply about the performance of the CMS and its relationship with platform infrastructure. But I think we also need to make use of the champions here in this virtual room. Paul Clark, our lead UX designer, found a quote that I wanted to share with you today, which is, ultimately, we think that the community provides the most value for open source projects and their ability to help spread the word about the project organically, lead credibility to the product, and ensure that the project evolves as the needs of its users. And to that point, we're currently thinking about what's required to support you in being champions for the product. And honestly, at this stage, a burning one for us at Silverstripe is revitalizing silverstripe.org. We think the content needs a revamp. Well, we know the content needs a revamp. It's currently not giving you the tools to show your clients that you've made the right decision by choosing Silverstripe. Also, the developer documentation can be a little bit rough around the edges. You'll be hearing later from Max and the CMS team, who will be talking about customizing the JavaScript stack of the CMS. He's got some really strong ideas on how focusing on the documentation and development tools could really support people here. And let's not forget the lessons from Uncle Cheese. revitalizing these in light of new opportunities around a decoupled CMS and using Next.js and the React framework are going to be pretty important to support you, but also in bringing new people on board and supporting them too. I've also seen feedback from digital agencies about the partner and developer directories. Is this something that you would see value in being revitalized too? So I want to state the obvious. People are here at this conference because they're passionate about Silverstripe CMS. My talk's only been brief, but I wanted to be honest about where some of the warning signs that we've been seeing are and how it actually aligns to where Wayne's head's at about where we're going. There's some immediate steps that we've got here that we see as being important. We've also been thinking about how Silverstripe CMS and the framework behind it can continue to support you in creating the things that you build. And remember, we need your help too. Whether that's picking up this conversation with others at the conference, finding opportunities to showcase your work, supporting innovation by adding to the module ecosystem, or even jumping on the community Slack channel or Stack Overflow to help someone else. My understanding is that there's always been a really, really strong community behind this, and now there's really a new wave to think about how to support that. So that's it from me. But before I go, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to those that have organized the Stripecon. And a big shout out to those that are speaking. We've seemed like we've got a really packed 3 days ahead of us, and I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bryn, for this nice insights. I have to find my position that you can see me. Very interesting, the outlook into the future. And we also think that besides contributors, it's really important to spread the usage of Silverstripe. And a main part of this community are agencies which are using Silverstripe. And besides the Silverstripe insights, we will also see great use cases of Silverstripe and how agencies work with this CMS. Yeah, we have now questions, I think. So what would you like to say to the community as a for this conference and for the future of Silverstripe, Wayne?
For me? Is it?
Wayne or Bryn?
I'll let you go, Wayne.
Me first? Okay. No, I think, Now, the first thing I would like to say is that, what we're doing is making sure that people like Bryn, Uncle Cheese, etc., are out there leading this and driving this engagement. Yeah. As Andy said as well, what we want to make sure we're doing is focus on not only just the software and what it could do, but actually look at those use cases. What I said before was it's fine to connect people and things and content and data and security and intelligence, all these fancy words, but at the end of the day, it's a human experience, a human life that we're impacting. And what we need to be doing is collecting those use cases that we have especially, and thinking about how we use those and how the software, how the technology can actually make people's lives much better. That's really important. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. We want to try to support you with S2 Hub and with the community here in Europe. Thank you for this great talk.